and welcome to Invisible, Breaking Through the Stigma of Addiction. I'm your host, Dean Anderson, and today we have a long-term addiction advocate, somebody who's been in the city for a really long time, working in addiction and mental health for 40 years, 34 years at one specific organization in the city, and we'll let her describe that. Today we have Linda Sibley, the co-CEO of CMHA Addiction Services. I'm going to let her describe it. Hi, Linda. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you, Dean. Thanks for having me.
So I fumbled over the...
As everyone does.
Because everyone does, and I don't feel bad about it at all. If you could just describe what it is that your role is and who you are, that'd be great.
Sure. So I work at CMHA, which stands for Canadian Mental Health Association.
Yeah.
And then it's always Thames Valley, so the region is always following the CMHA across the country.
Yeah.
And then we are Addiction and Mental Health Services. So it's CMHA Thames Valley Addiction Mental Health Services, and we have a funky little acronym of CMHA TVAMS because everyone likes an acronym. and that's CMHA Thames Valley Addiction Mental Health Services. I'm a co-CEO. I share that role of CEO with Beth Mitchell, Dr. Beth Mitchell.
Okay.
And we are the two that proposed we should work together to bring 4 organizations through to become one in a mental health and addiction integration.
Okay, so Canadian Mental Health Association and then formerly Addiction Services at Thames Valley come together. You decide to work together as so I get that. But you just said 4 organizations. What are the 4?
So there's been several phases. The first integration was between CMHA Elgin and CMHA Middlesex. So there were 3 CMHAs in the Thames Valley region. So 2 went together first and became CMHA Middlesex. And then Addiction Services of Thames Valley, which was a standalone charity as well, and CMHA Oxford standalone charity, all came together and became CMHA Thames Valley. So we have regional offices, we have hubs, mini hubs, taking services out to all the regions as much as we can right now, and we will do better in the future, to all of Thames Valley, which is Elgin, Oxford, and London, Middlesex.
Okay. And what are some of the big talking points or benefits of making that? Because I had the pleasure of being somewhat part of the organization on a side note, and we got to watch this come together. And it was big. It wasn't a little thing. So to make that big of a change, there's got to be some benefits. What are the, why?
Yeah, well, integration makes sense the most for the community and the people in it who need either mental health services or addiction services or both. And so a familiar concept in healthcare is what we call quadruple aim. And that is where an integration or something you do innovative in the system should benefit the clients themselves, the people who work in the organization, the community, and the system. So what we have done is a quadruple aim approach, naming all those benefits for those 4 quadrants, the people we serve, the community they live in, the system overall, and the people who work in it. It used to be triple aim, and what they left out was the satisfaction of the worker. And so part of that, the quadrants is that the integration should also benefit the people who work in the service, because we want them to be retained. We want them to stay a really long time where that makes sense for everybody. So the integration is better for the people themselves who use our services because they don't have to go to more than one place. They don't have to tell their story a bunch of times. We're not referring formally to one another because it's all one internal system. And when one gives consent to share their information, then that is, they're informed of where that information goes. But it allows us to do in the back end all of the data and the consent forms and the intake sheets. They don't have to do that a bunch of times because they really could have, in some cases, gone to more than one location, more than one organization, just to get a little bit of assistance. So that's probably the primary reason that we would want to do this. Integration doesn't save money necessarily. It does create efficiencies.
I think that's some of what people might think. Just putting it all together, then we can put all the money in one bucket, and then that saves us time and money. But
I mean, over time, there are efficiencies financially as well, but that's not the primary reason to do that. It is better for the community, and it's better for the system. I mean, there are things that happen over time. Things come together, things go, they're made smaller again, they come together. Systems do ebb and flow. In the future, that could happen, but right now, in the way that we feel about healthcare and how it should be delivered, the feeling is very strong that it should be integrated, in particular with addictions and mental health, because there are correlates of one another, antecedents and consequences of each. So when you have a group of staff who are delivering services, think about the benefits of all that cross-training. Their CVs, their resumes become very strong. And the one part of the quadrant about the people who work in the organization is that there's a real opportunity to move into other positions because, we have a lot of staff now. We have almost 700 staff, including all of our relief staff. Wow. And that's from, smaller organizations where there was maybe anywhere from 100 to 300. So you think about the job opportunities, the opportunity for advancement into leadership, doing new work and new programs. There's some real benefits for the staff themselves.
A million questions going through my head, but I'm glad that you segued into that because one of the first ones was how is that benefiting the employee to have this larger space? But I can see that from a resume perspective and from a growth and understanding. But we also know there's an extremely high burnout rate working in mental health and addictions. How would that benefit that? Is there things that get put in place to help people to feel healthier in the workplace?
Well, there are some real benefits to being a CMHA. First off, we're part of an Ontario branch system, so we are one branch in CMHA Ontario's system. And then Ontario is part of a national system as well. So we have the benefit of all of the research and the advocacy that both Ontario and CMHA National can do on behalf of our organizations across the country. So there are some special employee benefits and programs, and there's a new program called Your Health Space, I think it's called. And so the staff have access to privately and confidentially talk out issues that, are affecting them in their work. The work is hard. And so changing into different programs can also be a bit refreshing. That old change is as good as the rest. So you can learn new things, move to different programs. But we know very clearly that the post-pandemic reality is that, addictions, mental health, healthcare in general, the people who work in those services have had a very, very tough time helping to support the community. We hear it, in institutions like hospitals and public health, and certainly in our own organization. We're really aware of it. Being a larger organization allows us to have a little more bench strength in terms of the things that we can do around professional development and learning opportunities, and really a focus on a work-life balance. And that, there's an employer's responsibility in that. And there's also the employee has some responsibility. But we're all part of what happened with the pandemic and the stress that there was on families. So, we were able to be really flexible. We feel we were very flexible. And of course, like many organizations, healthcare or private, there is an opportunity for a hybrid office model, not for all programs. Some programs are like the emergency department where they're never closed. It's 24/7 and they've been face-to-face all the way through. Yeah. So we just, we do a lot in supervision. We do a lot in our team meetings, a lot through leadership to really stay on top of how it is that our people are feeling and what the burden is for them. So we're mindful all the time of how to perpetuate a work-life balance and really try to keep an open door with, whomever you report into as your direct supervisor to be able to share what's happening and to be able to get that off of you so that you can go back in and do that important work with the people who need you.
Yeah, vicarious trauma is a real thing.
It is.
For real. I see the value in all of that. The recognition I have is that in the work that I do, sometimes your hands are tied with a lot of things because you can't do that. So it's pretty wonderful to recognize you could have 700 employees and all these different things where you might be able to spread that knowledge, or at least if I don't know, I can at least reach over to somebody else and ask for help. So that makes my job less stressful, knowing that I have the support of others around me. So I can see how that would be useful for sure. With that said, on the flip side of the coin, from a client perspective, when the clients are going into an organization that has such a broad scope, does it make it difficult to narrow down? Or, I mean, I know that when we're doing a whole bunch of things all at the same time, sometimes we lose focus. And we talked a little bit of that about specifics before the cameras turned on, but I would love to hear about how we make sure that everybody gets their needs met in that big scope of things.
So one of the things that we continue to focus on is we have a little saying or a mantra, and that is regional benefits with local identity and feel. So what we're trying to build is a feeling for the person who comes to use our services, whether it be the family member or the person or the entire family, because we are age 12 and up. We try to create a feel where you don't know you're negotiating a fairly large system. So we're working towards, we aren't there completely yet, but we are working towards an integrated first contact. So wherever you land, if you off the website or you call or you walk into one of our offices, you're not going to know you're negotiating a large system because the people that you talk to will do that for you. So whereas in our individual for organizations before, and even within programs within those organizations, there might be separate processes that you go through to be determined as eligible or to go on a waiting list or whatever. That is handled. We now have first contact in an integrated manner, and then that contact form or contact experience goes through to the right programs that are where you should start. So really that starts with screening and assessment, meeting immediate needs, and the system will look after internally. The people who work in our system at CMHA TVAMS will handle what happens from there with client knowledge, participation, informed consent, etc. They might say, I'm just not too sure yet, and we'll go, that's fine. There's no time limit on this. So the client themselves, the resident as well, because we have housing programs, they would not feel like they're being navigated, but we take care of those details for them. And so let's say there is a need for withdrawal management, whether that's in the community or we have a withdrawal management program, both with our partner at the Center of Hope here in London, or we have a withdrawal management program now in St. Thomas.
Wonderful.
And so, it was a big deal.
Yeah.
We're pretty happy with that. So depending on what they need, do they need immediate needs, food security, temporary shelter? Is there a situation of violence at home? Are they at risk of being homeless? There's a long, long list. And luckily, we now, because we are who we are, we have a long list of programs that can meet those needs. And sometimes you'll do a little of this first and then go to something else. So we're in the process of setting that up so that people, they don't have to know. They do come to know through involvement with us because we, of course, people need to be involved in their treatment plan and in their choices. And when sometimes the timing's not right. And so we let them know that they can change that anytime they like. There's no 3 strikes you're out, never has been.
Yeah, 3 strikes you're out is not appropriate rule in mental health.
There's nothing like that.
Okay.
And some people it's a transitional issue. Some people it's been maybe their entire lives, or they're facing, a diagnosis of some kind that they will learn to live with. So, and along the way, we do have, system navigators. If you show up at our walk-in Addiction Mental Health Crisis Center in London on Huron Street. There's walk-in crisis services available in both Woodstock and St. Thomas as well. If it's a crisis situation, we're going to join you. Either our mobile team will come to you, you will come into us. At the crisis center we have here in London, there are system navigators. We have, information and brief referral to hurry up. It doesn't have to be a really long process to get people to the next natural step that makes sense for that moment.
Right. So you've adapted to the front line. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back after this break with more Linda Sibley. Thanks. Welcome back to Invisible: Breaking Through the Stigma of Addiction. Today on our show, we have Linda Sibley. Linda, so much wonderful information about the big acronym prior to this. But we have a limited amount of time. And what I really, really, really want to know about is these decades of experience that you have, especially in a leadership role. So you've had an intimate knowledge behind the scenes of what's happening. And I would love it if you could spend a few minutes just talking about how you've seen addiction and mental health evolve over the last, 3-4 decades.
Oh, I don't even know where to start. There's so many changes, and yet some things remain the same. So I'll start with some of the changes. There's been really positive change. I think in terms of how people view the work, in that people have a passion for the work, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't be adequately compensated or professional. And that by professional, I don't mean that's always academic. You don't have to be academically prepared. In fact, the best combination is probably some lived experience, some family observations, and some appropriate academic work, right? And you put that together, and you've got
ethics and
some ethics, and
some values
learn about documentation and those things. And that's a really perfect opportunity to really do good work. But however people come to the work, it is misunderstood as only a calling. And in my mind, that makes it okay to not compensate it appropriately. And so whether you are, doesn't matter to me what your professional designation or certification, the work is demanding, and it involves skill building and a skill set. People recover from addictions or mental health problems. And if it's a mental illness, for example, it's a strategy that moves them from A to B. It's not fairy dust. And so there's a strategy that is employed by the person themselves. They may have paid helpers. They may have professionals around them who, share important advice when asked. Always remember that, sharing unsolicited advice is seen as confrontation. Yeah. So what I've seen is a real improvement in how the work is seen. And I think that what we have experienced over the years is that the issue is stigmatized, the people who have the issue are stigmatized, and the people who help them are considered the same, whether they're there through their own lived experience or not. And that's something that, I believe is improving, and it needs to improve further. It is a profession. There are standards. One big improvement is a call to quality, to standardization, and accountability, so that reporting, documentation, what happens in programs, be they outpatient, case management, be they bed-based services, there are standards that need to be observed, and accountability expectations by your funder, whether you're funded by a foundation or the generosity of the community. There needs to be those standards. So it is there's a rhyme and a reason for what happens, why people go to specific programs. That is a big change. So that comes from one of the other big areas that's happened in both addictions and mental health, mental illness, mental health problems and mental illness, is screening and assessment. A bona fide treatment plan, rank ordered, based on client preference, based on the person themselves. What are they prepared to look at and change? Where's their motivation coming from? One big change in our world and in our profession is that we now understand that there is no such thing as the perfect motivation. And, years ago when I started, we did think there was that. I mean, I'd like to make a global apology to anyone who I said, I don't think you have the right motivation. How ridiculous. right? If you are motivated to change because of something, a person, a situation, there's just not a single thing wrong with that. However, over time, you need to own it. But you can't expect people to own it first. Sometimes they do, but it shouldn't be an eligibility criteria.
You can't put that weight into those those areas and then expect it to hold you up, right?
No, it's it's like motivation's not a light switch. It does come and go. It ebbs and flows, and that should be understood. And I believe it is understood more fully now. People come in different stages of change, and that needs to be allowed and to continue. So that's been a big change. The professionalism, the standards, the expectation of what one should experience. When you come and ask for some help, you should receive, there should be standard protocols, okay? And sometimes that does involve just the telling of one's story so that the identified helper can, sort of put together a plan and then ask for the client's permission to continue. So that not being told, not top down, that has changed. There's some way to go with that. The acceptance of 12-step communities as a bona fide vehicle to get to wherever it is you want to go with behavior change.
We've really ebbed and flowed on that, haven't we?
Yes, we have.
In and out and in and out.
We have. And, there's no, is it a disease? Is it not a disease? Should you be abstinent? We should be way past that now. People will choose what's right for them. They may choose differently as they experience the first part and go to the second set of choices. The other huge area, I cut my teeth in abstinence-based, disease-based approaches. And when I came from, my first, second, third job into the one that brought me to London, I was faced with a much wider range of people who asked for help. And what I experienced at that point was that not everyone is the far end of the continuum where their choices are very limited.
Yeah.
That is really where I had worked prior. And so I met people who were early on in experiencing problems, who had, every opportunity to choose moderation, for example, with alcohol. And of course, I'm old enough and I've worked long enough where moderation strategies for alcohol were unthinkable. And here we are now with advocates for safe drug supply because the drug supply is toxic and people can't get help if they are using toxic drugs. So the harm reduction approach has just
dead people don't get better.
Dead people don't get better. Yeah. And so we have a long, long way to go with that. And of course, there are many who just, they can't get their heads around it. That's okay because some people can and it needs to be available. So we've come from, in London where simple needle exchange was unthinkable. So moderation strategies with alcohol, and then to drugs, then needle exchange. Imagine.
How much that's changed, right? I remember when that was extremely taboo and there's lots of problems around that.
Yes, and
we're progressing.
Harm reduction's a big continuum that includes things like seatbelts, safer sex supplies with condom distribution, etc., needle exchange. All of those things I'm joyful to say I was there as those things happened. And I am a big advocate for safe drug supply. Not for everybody, but there should be choice. And because that may be the only way that people can be alive tomorrow. The research is clear for the small bits of research and studies that are being funded. There is some evidence that this needs to be added to our repertoire. So those things, the role of peer workers has changed. You and I chatted earlier. Peer work goes from the beginning in the 1930s with 12 steps. This is peer work, in its origins, and before it was formalized to, people just helped people. And now people with lived experience are welcome equitable compensation exactly on the same salary grids. That was a very important step in the compensation scheme for this profession.
Okay, yeah, good, because I see that always hasn't been, and it's people coming in doing the same work, but because they have peer or lived experience, they're actually compensated less, which didn't make sense because it was like, What? Okay, wait a minute.
Yeah, I'm in against
and then
stigma.
we're trying to go against stigma,
Yeah,
right? But it's
stigma
like
at
we're
work.
paying somebody less because of their lived experience. So, with that said, the title of the show has stigma in the name. How have you seen that evolve and change over the years? And I know it's an uphill battle. We'll probably, and I don't want to say never get there, but as long as we have people with their own beliefs and values, there's going to be certain stigmas. But how have you seen that evolve in us taking care of that or changing it?
Well, I'm really pleased that the conversation is happening all around us. It does ebb and flow as well. Sometimes it becomes extremely political, and that's not fair to the people who have the issues that they're concerned about or that their family's concerned about. So stigma has changed. I mean, we know that in mental health, with mental illness, real overt work has been done to reduce stigma and really smash it. The problem is that we're behind with substance use, problem gambling, gaming, and hypersexuality. Very still clouded in shame. We need to encourage people to tell their stories so that we can help the public, become more educated. I often say when it comes to lived experience, I'm not sure I know a single person that doesn't have something in their lives, someone they know, a friend who has, a concern around substance use. Could be transitional, could be a long-term thing, gambling, whatever it may be. So we really all have lived experience, and we really need to embrace that.
Can we talk about sugar for a second?
Yeah, and make it okay. Yes.
Oh my God, the coffee addiction. Yeah, you're right. It's everyone. Everyone has an experience. Yeah.
And sometimes I think it's because it's so close to so many of us. We don't want to look at it. I have often made an analogy to animal cruelty. People can't look at it, and it gets really hard to advocate for the money that's needed and the shelters, et cetera. It sort of hurts your heart. And so I wonder if that's not really part of what makes people turn away. And because so many people have someone in their lives that maybe they're absent, that it makes it harder to look at the issue because it's actually quite close.
Yeah. So if you could, I believe that we need to start pointing our voices outwards, and instead in the service industry and the helping field, we tend to all talk to each other about the problems, but we don't pen our voice outward enough. I mean, we can do it. So the last thing I could ask of you today, if you could point your voice outward and tell people what they can do to fight stigma, what would you say to them?
I would encourage people to bring their humanity, focus on their humanity, because it's just people experiencing problems. Some of the people that we're seeing right now are more visible than others. And I always say, remember that is someone's father, mother, a son, a daughter, a friend, and that could be your neighbor's child. And that we need to bring it back to what it's really about. It's a costly problem, and we do need to invest. But that money will be well spent because it's on people's lives and their welfare.
Wonderful. Thank you for being on the show,
Linda.
Linda.
Thank you for having me.
And that was Linda Sibley, and we'll see you next time on Invisible: Breaking Through the Stigma of Addiction.